Hey everyone, welcome to Bad Kids Don't Exist. This is the podcast that helps adults better understand kids to create environments where kids and their caregivers can thrive. My name is Stuart Perry. I go by Mr. Stu. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm an autism spectrum disorder clinical specialist, and I'm a child therapist who just loves helping adults better understand kids. I think a lot of frustration about being a parent or a teacher or somebody who takes care of children, really, it all just comes down to misunderstanding and not getting what's going on inside of kids' minds, children's minds, and not seeing that they are different than us in some amazing, amazing ways. But if you don't understand those amazing ways that they're different than us, those ways that they're different than us can be very frustrating. So I am here to help adults better understand kids. And in order to do that, I have some questions that people have written in and talked with me about children, about their kids, about either the kids that are in their homes or in their classrooms. And I'm so excited to be able to talk with you about those things. Let's jump right into question number one. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to post those in the chat and I'll get to them as much as I possibly can. I love that you're tuning in to check all this out. And thank you so much for the support. If you are not yet, be sure to follow Mr. Stu TV. That's MisterStu TV on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. There you'll find all sorts of different content that really just helps adults better understand kids. Well, let's jump into question number one. Here it is. It says, "Dear Mr. Stu, I've noticed that I let my kid watch anything they want, regardless of the age rating. Recently, my child watched a movie that seemed to give them nightmares. This made me wonder, why do content ratings and warnings on TV shows, movies, and video games matter? How can I ensure that my child is watching content that is appropriate for their age group and mental well-being? Thank you for your advice." This is a great question and one that comes up pretty often because a lot of times the things that kids want to participate in can be above their age range. It can be above the things that are rated as appropriate for them. And it's important to know that those ratings are guidelines. They're not laws or anything like that. They are guidelines, and they are guidelines made by parents. The group that puts together the age ratings and guidelines for video games and TV shows and movies is just a group of parents and teachers and other people that know kids, and they make decisions based on their opinions. So it's important to know, first off, that you have to know your child and know what it is they can handle. Know what it is that would be appropriate for them specifically. Them, not other kids around their age, but your child. Try to figure out what is best for them. Now, beyond that, there are some things to take into consideration. And if you look at ratings, there are some things that you can see as pretty standard as the ratings increase. Shows and movies and video games that are created for very young children are very animated and not realistic whatsoever. Things like Peppa Pig, things like Blue's Clues, those things aren't realistic. If a child looks around in their world, they don't actually see those things happening. And that's one of the things that allows the rating to be lower on those things, because it's not something that a child experiences in their own life. Then as you start to move up in the ratings, things start to get a little more realistic. Things like SpongeBob are a little more realistic than Peppa Pig, or at least look more realistic in the world. And then as you move up, they get more realistic. So compare a video game of something like a Disney video game or a SpongeBob video game to Call of Duty. Call of Duty is created to look as realistic as it possibly can so that it draws you into this environment. All that is really important because as kids are experiencing these different forms of media, their brain is encoding that information to make sense of their world. So if they are exposed to something that is too realistic and too intense for their developmental level, then what will happen is the child can actually be traumatized by that information. If they are playing Call of Duty and they're seeing people get shot and killed and blood and it looks very real, that information that the child's brain is taking in can cause trauma. And for adults like you and like me, it doesn't cause that trauma because we see the disconnect in the world. We see that, yes, it looks realistic, but this is a video game. But to a child, they can't make that distinction as easily. That's why those ratings are higher. The other thing to understand that maybe you didn't know is that if something is rated at a certain level, then everything surrounding that program is allowed to be at that level, even if it's at that level for different reasons. Let me explain. There are lots of sci-fi movies or superhero movies that are rated PG-13 for action, violence, and some language. Now, it would be great if all of the commercials and trailers and everything that went along with that movie were also rated PG-13 or lower for action, violence, and language, but they are allowed to show movies and trailers and commercials and other things that are rated PG-13 for other reasons. It could be you go to see a superhero movie that's rated PG-13 for action, violence, and language, and there's a trailer for a movie that is rated PG-13 for sexual content or for gore, whatever it might be. So you have to understand the full rating. That just because your child might be ready for this one specific movie does not mean that they're ready for all of the things they may be exposed to by going to see that movie or even by watching that movie on television or a TV show. The commercials that surround a TV show have to be the same age rating as the television show, but they can be rated the same for different reasons. All that to say, it's important to understand your child, know what it is that could be appropriate for them specifically and on an individual basis. And as a parent, it's really important to have insight into what your child is watching. Do you sit and watch things with them? Do you watch on YouTube with them as they go through their scrolling sensational time? Do you see what it is that they are seeing, and do you feel like it's appropriate for them? It's okay to and important to have those conversations with your child about what is appropriate, what isn't appropriate, and why it is appropriate or is not appropriate right now in their life. Not that they can never watch it ever, but that right now it might just be too intense. Those are some of the reasons why ratings can be so important. And I know that it can be trendy to kind of let your child play whatever, watch whatever, go to the movies and see whatever. But it's really important to keep it in mind because the things that children are exposed to, the things that their minds are exposed to can shape their worldview, and it can also leave a lasting impact. Thank you so much for that question. Let's see here. Okay, we're going to go on to question number 2. Here it is. It says, "Dear Mr. Stu, I watch a lot of your videos and I appreciate being able to understand my kids better." Thank you so much for that. Make sure, if you are not yet, be sure to like and subscribe on Facebook and Instagram. It's at Mr. Stu TV there, and on YouTube. It's youtube.com/@MrStuTV. Check it out there. You'll see lots of videos and tips and techniques and thoughts. Check it out. Make sure you follow in all those places. But I've got a question that I and a lot of my other friends have because we cannot understand what's going on with our kids. Ooh, I'm intrigued. I've noticed that after school, my kid transforms into a whirlwind of energy, zipping around the house like a tornado. Just yesterday, I found my favorite plant knocked over in the living room amidst the whirlwind chaos. Why does my child exhibit this behavior post school hours? Thanks so much for that question. And I love the way you worded things. You are a wordsmith. This is something that comes up fairly often, especially when kids are just getting used to the school routine, if they're in kindergarten or if they're just kind of figuring it out, or at the start of the school year. It can be that your child shows great behaviors during the school day, and then as soon as they get home, it is just a tornado that whips through your house. And there's a way to think about it, and then there's something to do about it. The way to think about it is that your child has kept it together all day long. School is 7 hours or more. And if you add in bus rides or car trips or after school activities, they have kept it together for a long, long time. And now they have to let it out. All of that energy has been pressurizing inside of them, and they have done a really good job of keeping it all held together. But when they get home and they get comfortable, it's got to come out. That is why you see the tornado whip through your house when your child steps off the school bus and comes through the front door. It can also be sometimes why there is more emotionality after school, that the child maybe is more frustrated, or they're more prone to start crying or even giggling. It's because they've kept all those things inside all day, and they're looking for some reason and some safe place that they can let it all out. So first and foremost, take it as a big compliment. I know it doesn't feel that way all the time, but it's a great compliment if your child feels safe enough that you are the one that they let all that energy out with. Now, here's what you can do to help in those situations, because it's not just about being able to deal with it and grin and bear it, but you can actually do some things that helps your child. The biggest thing that I can recommend is that when your child gets home, it shouldn't be the time where they're told to do another thing. Imagine if you have been at work all day, and let's face it, the school day is almost as long as a work day. And if you take into account bus rides, especially in Louisville, Kentucky, where I'm located, if you take into account bus rides, it is as long or longer than a typical workday. So take that into account and think, when you get home from work, how does it feel if your child or your partner or someone looks at you and asks you immediately? You walk through the front door and immediately they say, "Hey, you need to do whatever the thing is. Hey, you need to make sure you do the laundry. Hey, what's for dinner? Hey, whatever it might be." You've just worked all day long, and now someone is asking you to do another thing as soon as you walk through the door. It's very frustrating. For kids, it's the same way. But so many times we think, well, they need to do all the things they have to do before they get to do the things that they want to do. They need to make sure that they take care of their homework before they move on and do the next thing. I know that that's the mindset, but that's not the truth. We can allow kids to have some decompression time before they have to do another thing they have to do. And that's a big way that you can support your child and help them not have that chaos tornado as soon as they walk through the front door. When they get off the bus and come in, you can allow them to have some decompression time. I really recommend that that decompression time includes getting out physical energy, not just sitting and playing video games, not just sitting on the phone, but getting out physical energy. Because if they can release some of that physical energy in positive ways, then it won't come out as much in the negative or difficult ways. So allow them, let them come through the front door, and then let them run outside or jump on the trampoline, or if it's warm enough, jump in the pool, or just run around the house, or do a workout or a fun little physical activity or a race or whatever it might be. Allow them to get out some of that physical energy. And you'll start to see that over time, yes, it's all been pressurized, but then you hit the release valve and they're allowed to let it out. And then they come home and it's all pressurized, but then they hit the release valve and it's allowed to all come out. If you tell children as soon as they've spent a whole day working that they need to do more work, whether it be homework or laundry or cleaning up their room or whatever, if that's the first thing they have to do, then you're just pressurizing it more. And don't be surprised if all that energy explodes out, rather than what you could do is finding some positive ways to let that energy out, to let it come out in some ways that aren't going to drive you wild. So just remember, they're working really hard. They've kept it together all day long, and they've got to find some ways to let some of that energy out. As adults, we find ways to let that energy out after work. We have to do the same with kids. We have to allow them to let it out. Then they'll be ready for the next thing they have to do. So keep that in mind. Try allowing them to use some physical activity afterwards and see if that helps. I think that it will. Thank you so much for that question. Let's look at question number 3. Hi, Mr. Stu. I am an elementary school teacher and I attended one of your trainings, and I believe you are actually coming to my school to lead some professional development later this year. Oh, great. I'm so excited to be there with you. I love teaching trainings to parents and therapists and other people who take care of children, and teachers, of course. If you have professional development at whatever organization that you work at, about children's mental health or about kids, or about understanding kids, or you need that training, head over to badkidsdon'texist.com, and there you'll see a link that says booking, and you can see all the different workshops and seminars and keynote presentations that I have to be able to go out and actually train other people how to understand kids better. So thank you so much for saying that you enjoyed it. I look forward to seeing you a little bit later this year. I loved the presentation I went to, and I'm feeling excited about the one coming up, but I'm feeling overwhelmed as a teacher lately. Ooh, this is something that I hear often. Overwhelmed as a teacher. One of my students is struggling with mental health issues, and I have 25 other kids to attend to. Yes! How can I support this student effectively while ensuring I meet the needs of all my students? This is a great question. You all, when you write in these questions, I am blown away at some of the things that you are willing to share with me and willing to ask. Thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing that you are feeling overwhelmed and you need some help and some tips and tricks, and you want the best for your students. And that's the way teachers are. Teachers want the best for their students. It can just be hard when it seems like you've got one student who's struggling and you've got 25 other kids to keep up with. I can understand that that could feel very overwhelming, very defeating, and make you feel like sometimes you're burnt out and you want to give up. So thank you so much for reaching out. I do have some ideas for you. This is something that comes up all the time, and there are some thoughts that I have about just the concept of one kid who's struggling, and then also some ways that you can help that one child with all the other kids that you still have to deal with. The first thing to understand is that a lot of the tips and tricks and techniques that are shared are things that your whole class could benefit from. And that's why I said I have some thoughts about the concept of one kid who's struggling. Actually, every kid is struggling. Every child is struggling in some way. Now, that doesn't mean that every child is having these big explosive behaviors that are going on, or that every child is going to just be so overwhelming to you, but every child needs support in different ways. So it's important for us to realize that it's not just one student who is struggling or one student who needs support. They all need support. It's just they may need support in different ways, and they may be able to cope with certain things in different ways. And it could be that they show it in different ways or don't show it in different ways. All that to say, the first thing to keep in mind is that many of the tips and tricks and techniques that you know that will help that one student are actually great for the whole class. The biggest thing that I see when I go into schools is that children are expected to sit still and be quiet for so long. I was in a kindergarten classroom the other day, and children were expected to sit still and be quiet. And I was there for 2 hours. And for that 2 hours, the children were told to sit still and be quiet. Do you know how hard it is for a child who is 5 years old, who is just experiencing this school thing for the first time, to sit still and be quiet for 2 hours without a break, and probably longer? I left after 2 hours. If you are thinking of ways that can support this one student, see if it's something that you can do for all your students. For instance, there are some things that I train teachers about not calling students out in front of the class. And I've helped write IEPs, those are individualized education plans for children with mental health diagnoses, where it actually says in there, discipline is to be private, where the teacher actually needs to have a one-on-one conversation with this student, not do it in front of everyone. Well, that's something that will help every child. It doesn't have to be that you think, oh, I have to treat this one child differently than all the others because I know what's going on with them. It can be, hey, I know this thing can help this kid. If it can help this one kid, it's probably going to be helpful for the whole class. And just like the last question I had, talking about how kids have kept it all together all day long and then it explodes out at the end of the day when they get home. Here's something to think about as a teacher. If you are seeing a lot of your students start to fidget, or you're seeing a lot of your students start to have difficulty paying attention, or if they're starting to murmur, maybe it's not time to shout, be quiet. Maybe it's time that they need to release some of that energy that is all built up inside of them. So that's something that you can do with your whole class, and it will benefit the one student and it will benefit all the others if every 30 minutes, every hour, you just do a little break. It can be a big stretch, a fun stretch, not a here's how we're going to stretch today, but a fun movement of some kind. Or some type of, hey, let's do some jumping jacks now, or let's do some push-ups, or hey, little Jimmy, why don't you tell us? You can pick jumping jacks, push-ups, or sit-ups. What do you want us to do? You've done such a great job of sitting still for this last 30 minutes. You get to pick what our activity is. Are we going to run in place, do jumping jacks, or do push-ups? And little Jimmy gets to decide. Well, now you've brought in the whole class. And yes, in your mind, you can be thinking, I have to do this for this one student, but it's going to help all of my students. And that is the way you can start to think about these things that support that one student. Yes, it will support this one student if I'm using timers. Well, guess what? All little kids benefit from the use of timers. It helps them to understand this concept of time that is beyond what their brain can get at the time. Yes, little Jimmy needs some physical activity breaks throughout his school day. Well, guess what? All of the children will benefit from this physical activity break. Guess what? Little Jimmy in his IEP, it's written, we don't take his recess away. So guess what? We're not taking any of our kids' recess away. There's other things we can do when it comes to discipline other than take away the one time of the day that kids get to release some of that energy. So start to think in that conceptual way where it's a system. It's not just, oh, I have to go out of my way to support Jimmy. No, it is, hey, Jimmy needs the support. I wonder if there's a way I could just do that with the whole class. If you start to think about it that way, it doesn't become a burden to help the one student, and all the other students benefit as well. If you can think about it that way as a teacher, first off, kudos to you, because there are so many things that can benefit kids that we leave out because we're so focused on getting them to understand the core curriculum that we forget they need support as they're learning that core curriculum. And it could be you have a star student who is able to sit still and be quiet, and they're able to focus on all of their work and there's no difficulties whatsoever. Well, guess what? Even for them, it will be beneficial to implement some of those techniques. If ever you are a teacher and there is something that comes up as, hey, this child needs this thing, I don't know how to do that, or I don't know how to help the whole class experience that same benefit, please reach out. You can write into question@mrstewtv.com, and I am happy to help you figure out how to use that strategy for your entire classroom. And that's really the mindset you have to adopt is, yes, we have a document that says I have to do this thing with this student. It doesn't mean I have to do this thing with only this student, and all of your students will benefit if you're able to implement some of those things from one student's IEP into the whole classroom environment. For some reasons, at some point, we got away from that. We started to say, oh, this child needs more support, or this child has a diagnosis, so we have to treat them differently in the school. It's not that. It's, why don't we find ways so that all the kids can thrive? And yes, if I'm seeing that one or two or three or sometimes more of your students in the class have a mental health diagnosis and they need this extra support, well, you're correct. You can't run to little Jimmy and then run to little Susie and then run to all the other kids who need your support and do this one-on-one support with them at all times. But you can find ways. If you see little Jimmy start to fidget more, and you can see that he's starting to get off task, and you can see it's about to go down, then maybe you say, hey, class, I can see that it is tough to keep it all together right now. We're going to take one of our physical activity breaks, and Susie, you get to pick what our activity is. Do you want to do push-ups, jumping jacks, or run in place? Woo! All right, we're going to do it for 30 seconds and go. Now, everybody's together. You're supporting this one student. You're not having to take time to support only this one student, and every student in the class gets the benefit. That is how you can support the one student and all the rest at the same time. Did you ever think it was possible? It is possible. Great. Thank you so much for writing in that question, and I do look forward to seeing you at your school. Make sure that you didn't include your name or anything like that in the message, but feel free to come up and say hello when you see me out at your school later this year. Let's go to question number 4. Dear Mr. Stew, I love how you normalize therapy for kids and try to find lots of ways to get them the support they need. Thanks so much. I have found that at some point, everybody needs a therapist. Now, whether or not they get that therapist is up in question, but everybody at some point needs some professional help and support. So thank you so much for saying that's something that I do. My child is in therapy and I've seen some great progress. However, I've noticed that despite my child making progress, there are times when they revert back to old disruptive habits. Ah, yes. For example, last week, after we had a great day at the park, they suddenly became very defiant and threw a tantrum when it was time to leave. Why does my child seem to struggle with maintaining positive behavior even after showing improvement? Great question. Thank you so much for writing in. And again, this is something that we all see, especially if a child is in therapy. It can look like, oh, they're doing so great. They're probably ready to leave. And then we're right back to square one. And it doesn't seem to make sense, especially when those things seem to be beneficial to the child. They're getting in trouble less. They're getting more of the things they want. Why is it that they have decided to go back? Why is it that they have decided to revert to these disruptive things that they used to do, that they didn't do for a while, and now they're choosing to do them again? A big thing to understand is that our brains are wired to watch for and follow patterns. Our brains like patterns. And the reason for that is our brains, as they experience a pattern, they see, ooh, we can stay safe in this pattern. We can stay alive in this pattern. So any change, even positive change, can be scary to the brain because the brain is wondering, I know this looks good, but are we going to stay alive? Are we going to stay alive as all of this change is going on? I know they say it's good, and I know we feel a little bit better, but it is not a proven system just yet. Can we stay alive this way? So the brain, when it experiences a pattern for a long time, and then it goes away from that pattern, and then it wants to go back to the old way because it's like, yeah, we dipped our toe in the water and we wanted to try it out a little bit, but I know we're going to stay safe and alive this other way. Or at least the brain will believe it's going to stay safe and alive the other way. So it can be stressful. Change is stressful. Even positive change is stressful, especially for children. Kids' brains do not like change, even positive change. They want to stick to the status quo. They want to stick to the pattern. So that is why you might see that revert happen sometimes, is because the child has experience this pattern and it feels all safe and all good, and then their brain is like, wait, no, I don't feel safe. We need to go back to the old way. Even though we were getting in more trouble, even though we were having more fights, whatever it might be, we need to go back to the old way because the old way was safe. So that is one of the reasons that can happen, that revert can happen. But remember that we as adults also go back to those disruptive things. How many times in your life as an adult, not as a child, but as an adult, how many times in your life have you gone in your head and you've been like, okay, I'm never doing that again. And then not too long after, you do that thing again. Or in your mind, you might be thinking like, oh, I need to make sure that I eat more vegetables, and then the vegetables are offered and you are not eating the vegetables. Or, oh, I need to make sure that I watch how much soda I drink, and then you are drinking more soda. So don't judge a child for going back when we do the exact same thing. Some of it is brain pattern, and some of it is just, some of those things are fun, they feel good, they taste good, whatever it might be. And it's hard to leave them behind forever. So keep in mind, the brain likes patterns, and we as adults also go back to the disruptive things. But the big thing to do to try to prevent some of that backpedaling or some of that backsliding is to stay consistent. A lot of times in therapy, I explain that therapy is not this linear trajectory where it's just, okay, we start here and then we're going to end here, and the whole time it's just going to be smooth sailing until the end. That's not how it works. Therapy actually goes through a few different waves. There's one really quick wave where it's like, oh my goodness, this is a miracle, we should have come sooner. Then it goes right back to how things were, and it's like, Mr. Stu doesn't even know what he's talking about. Why are we even doing therapy? Then things get better for a while, and then they plateau. They don't just keep going up. Then it's baseline again, and it's time to end services and see where that baseline is. And then maybe in the future, the child needs to come back. Again, therapy is not like this. It's like this. That's how therapy works. And parents and caregivers will come to me and say, I think we need to change something. I think they need to be on medication. I think all these different things. We need to add something, change something, do something different. And really, in those times, if they have done well within a system and then they are pushing back against that system, it's not time to change the system. When you change the system, the child has to relearn all of those things, and you're actually starting back at square one. But if you stay consistent, then their brain starts to learn two things. It starts to learn, number one, no matter how hard we push, this is not changing. We're going to have to adapt to the system. The system is not going to adapt to us. And number two, the brain learns this is safe. I know I thought it wasn't going to be safe, but it is. And as the brain learns that message, that's where you can have the lasting growth. I said that therapy goes through waves. It goes mainly through two waves, and there's some little waves throughout, but two big waves. And that second wave, after the reverting back to the old behavior and getting in trouble again and all of that, the growth that happens after that regression is the lasting growth. And it's all about staying consistent. It can feel very stressful because it's like, oh my goodness, I need to make sure that we're going to change everything, and I need to start yelling more, and I need to start doing more things. Nope. Stay with the system that worked. Stay consistent with that system, and then you'll start to see that progress come back. It's just the brain really trying to push back, because the brain is nervous that what they are trying now is not going to work, or it's not going to be safe. Stay consistent, and then over time, you'll see it go back. But remember that growth is not this one line straight up. It's a big waves and roller coaster, and there's lots of things that can come up in the middle, and there's lots of things that can be happening inside the child's mind, and all sorts of different things that could be going on. So give them some grace, give them the benefit of the doubt that they are trying the hardest that they can, and then stay consistent with the things that have worked, and you'll start to see that growth again. Now, if you stay consistent with those things that worked, and you've stayed consistent for 3 months, let's say you've stayed consistent, and I know I laughed, but I'm not kidding. You've stayed consistent for 3 months, and really consistent, not just saying that you're staying consistent, but really staying consistent for 3 months. And then it's still no growth, no change. They're still reverting back to those things. Then it might be time to change something, but give it some time, because change is scary and change takes time. Wow. Thank you so much for that question. I've got one more for today. But thank you all so much for writing in your questions. You can write in your questions to question@mrstutv.com. That's question@mrstutv.com. And there I can answer. I take them all, and my team takes them and sorts them out, and then they give me this list of questions to answer. So if you have a question, you can post there. You can also find me on social media. I'm most active on Facebook and Instagram. You can find me there at Mr. Stu TV. That's MISTERSTUTV. You can send a direct message either on Facebook or Instagram, and I'm happy to look at your question there. Or on YouTube, it's youtube.com/@MrStuTV. If you comment in one of the videos a question, then I and my team review those, and I'm happy to pull a question from there to answer as well. So thank you all so much for writing in these questions, and I hope to get even more in the future. Here is question number 5. Dear Mr. Stu, how can I hack my own ADHD brain? Ooh. Good question. To participate in activities or games or shows my kids enjoy. I do my best to model showing interest, but my brain is screaming on the inside sometimes. I love that. Yeah, how can I hack my own ADHD brain? And how can I pretend to be interested in the things that my kids are interested in? This is a great question and such an honest one. Let's be real. Most of the things that kids like to watch or play or participate in are just not things we're interested in. I can remember when I was younger, my older brother loved playing video games. He still loves playing video games, but back then it was an obsession. He loved playing video games, and he would sit and play video games for hours and hours and hours. And my parents wanted to spend some time with him, but they didn't want to play video games. So they came up with two different things. One is that my mom would sit there and just watch my brother play games, and she would talk with him about what he was doing and ask questions about what was going on. And then the other was my brother would teach my mom or my dad to play video games along with him, where he would actually tell them about the controls and he would destroy them at all these different games. Mario Kart, 007 GoldenEye on N64. He would destroy them on those games, but they were sitting and they were spending some time together. Now, that was not for the playing of the video games or watching my brother play the video games. That was not my parents' favorite time of the day. It was not that they loved sitting and watching a video game or sitting and playing a video game, but they remembered the goal. The goal of that time is to spend time with your child. So, yes, they're going to be watching or playing or doing things that you in particular don't want to do. That's actually positive, because that means that they are doing things that are likely developmentally appropriate for a child, not trying to do adult level things. And it also means that you've grown up too. So congratulations. But the goal for that time together is not to enjoy the activity, it's to enjoy the time. And once you start to think about it that way, it can be a little bit easier to enjoy the time together, because it doesn't really matter what you're doing. It matters that you are together. And if you can keep that in mind, if you can keep in mind that, you know what, yes, they're going to play this video game that I cannot stand. I am not good at it. I don't want to be good at it. This is terrible. If you can keep that in mind, then you start to focus on the time together rather than what it is you're doing. Because what it is you're doing doesn't really matter as long as you're spending the time together. So don't try to convince yourself to enjoy the activity. Don't try to convince yourself to love Fortnite or love Roblox or love Pokemon or love whatever show it is they're watching as much as they love it. But you do love them, and you do love spending time with them. And it doesn't really matter what you're doing because you just love them. If you keep that in mind, it's a little bit easier to stomach some of those things that they do. The other thing is to find the pieces you do enjoy. It's likely that you don't hate the whole activity or you hate all of what's going on, even if you're playing Fortnite with your child and it's just you like one of the characters you got to play as. Great. You can focus in on the pieces you do enjoy. Maybe it's Pokemon, and there's a Pokemon you think is kind of cute. Well, you can focus in on that Pokemon that you think is kind of cute and try to find some things that are funny or interesting or exciting. Or if you see your child get really excited about something, isn't that exciting to see? So you can focus in on the pieces of this activity that you do enjoy, even though you don't enjoy the bulk of it. And finally, you can stay genuine. You can let your child know that you don't love this thing that they love, but it's okay that they love it and you love spending time with them. So no, you don't love Pokemon as much as they love Pokemon, or no, you don't love Fortnite, Roblox. I know I went through the list. SpongeBob, Peppa Pig, whoever it is, you might not love those things as much as they love those things, but you love them. And so you can say, they'll say like, oh, don't you just love Fortnite? Don't you just love Pokemon? And you can say, it's not my favorite, but I do love it when I'm with you. Do you see how it teaches the child a few things? First, it's okay to not love the same things as the people you love. It's okay to have disagreements. It's okay to not have the same hobbies and the same likes and dislikes. All that is fine. It comes down to the love you have for each other. And it also shows them that you're going to be genuine. So that when you then praise them later, when you say, oh, wow, you did a really great job at cleaning your room, or you did a really great job at playing Fortnite, they know you're being honest. Because guess what? Just a little while ago, you told them something they didn't want to hear. So now when you tell them something that's positive that they do want to hear, they believe it because they're thinking, you know what? If they thought the other thing, they would say that I didn't do a good job because they tell me when they disagree with me. It does so many things when you can be honest with kids. Now, that doesn't mean, no, I hate Pokemon, I hate Fortnite, it's my least favorite, I wish you wouldn't play it, it's so stupid. Even if you feel that way. You can find ways to be gentle and honest at the same time. That is how you can hack your own ADHD brain. Keep in mind that it's about the time together, not necessarily about the activity that you're doing. Find those pieces that you do enjoy and stay honest about the parts that you don't. If you'll do that, you can get through some of those video game times a little bit easier. Well, thank you all so much for tuning in today. It has been great, again, answering some questions. I'm going to do this again next week at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Facebook and YouTube. I hope that you'll tune in. If you have a question, send it on Facebook or Instagram at Mr. Stu TV. You can also post a comment in a video on YouTube. That's youtube.com/@MrStuTV. Or you can write in an email. That's question@MrStuTV.com. That's MISTERSTUTV.com. And I love helping adults better understand kids. If I can do that, then I can create environments where kids and their caregivers thrive. If that sounds like a good fit for you and an event that you have coming up, whether it be professional development or a training or a conference, I would love to hear from you. You can go to badkidsdon'texist.com/booking, and there you'll find all the information you need to hire me as a keynote speaker or a workshop leader. I can't wait to hear about your next event and make that next event a great one. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I hope that you'll tune in again next week. Until then, remember, some things exist, some things don't. Bad kids don't exist. Peace.